Oh, hello, my friends. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me. Today's Friday, June 7th, and there's something not right in Denmark here with my mic. So just give me a second while I figure this out. Talk amongst yourselves. It's always something over here in the YouTube world. It was working a second ago. I'm going to unplug it and plug it back in, just like the olden days. How is everybody doing today? Today we're going back to our roots. We're going back to Long Island. Oh, it's always something. Let's see. Is that better? StreamYard, I need a meeting. One sec. You can hear me, I know, but it's not going through the mic. It's going through the MacBook speaker's mic, which is not good because it should be better. So just give me 1 second to see if I can figure this mishigas out. I don't know. If you can hear me, I guess that's all that really matters right now, but 'tis always something. All right. How's everybody feeling about Rex Heuermann being indicted on 2 more of these cold cases out here on Long Island? Crazy town, right? Crazy. I think there's going to be a lot more to come. That is my prediction. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I feel there's going to be more to come. I really thought when they announced this news, I really thought that this was going to be with regard to Karen Vergata for some reason. I don't know why. I just had that feeling. And then a lot of people thought it would be Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor, but it turns out to be Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costilla, who is a victim that we have not heard a lot about until just recently. So we're going to go over the documents today. That's right. That is right. Teresa says it sounds fine, kind of funny. I was watching Duty Ron, but he didn't go over the documents. So I was like, I bet Melanie went over them. And here I am. Because yesterday I was live on the Karen Reed trial. I'm covering that trial live every day. So I was going to go to court yesterday. I was going to go out to Riverhead for this. And I was hoping that this indictment would be in the afternoon, but it turned out to be in the morning because I could have shot out to Riverhead for the afternoon session if they were going to do that. But he was indicted in the morning, and so I didn't get to make it. So I figured save it for today so that we could go over the superseding indictment together. And that is what we're doing. And I have said, my friends, and you know, because we've been covering this story together for a long time, since July of 2023, when he was first arrested. And I have said all along that I refuse to believe that there is more than one SK dumping bodies along Ocean Parkway. I've just refused to believe it. Everyone told me I was crazy because the MOs were different, because the Gilgo 4 were found intact, and because the Manorville victims were, torsos and other parts found. I'm going to try and be as sensitive as I can to the YouTube algorithm and also to my viewers who I know don't like the graphic language. So I'm going to try as best I can to not say certain words and to ask you to not type certain words in the chat because of the YouTube AI program is a little wonky and they don't like it. And so we kind of have to play by their rules. I don't like their rules, but the rules we got for today anyway. So I've redacted a couple of things from the superseding indictment, not too many. I can sort of speak around them. Hello, East Quag. These crimes are in my backyard. I used to spend a lot of time in East Quag myself at the Bordy Barn and such. And so exit 70 was always off the LIE was always my route to the Hamptons. And so I would drive right by Halsey Manor Road in Manorville to get out there, to get on 27 and head east to East Quag. So little did I know that I was driving right by for so many years the site of where victims were dumped. One of his dump sites, as we're going to see. He was a meticulous planner, but a very, very bad speller. So a couple of weeks ago, they were searching that area in Manorville again with cadaver dogs, and they were very secret about what they were looking for. And we didn't know what they were looking for. And then they did like a 6 or 7 day search again of the Massapequa home, which is the home of Rex Heuermann and his family. And we saw them bringing out tons more evidence, and we couldn't figure it out. We had an idea that there was some more indictments coming. We didn't know if they were going to be new victims or old victims. So we found out that they are victims that we already had heard of. And I have just a feeling from reading this document that there are going to be so many more, that he is going to be connected. I think, here's my prediction, and I've said this in the past, it's not new information, that I think he's going to be one of the most prolific SKs of all time. And I think that it's not just going to be confined to Long Island. There are many speculations, or that he has been rumored to perhaps be involved with some other sort of pattern killings, like the New Bedford Highway killings. There are certain areas that he used to go to. Remember, his mother lives in, I think, North or South Carolina, right? And his brother lives there too. So there's a route that he would take. And there's another strip of highways. Yeah, Atlantic City. I always thought that he was responsible for the Atlantic City 4. It's the Atlantic City 4 too, right? I did a whole show on that. Time flies, you guys. And it has been a long time since I looked at that Atlantic City show, but I did a show and I talked about all of the similarities between what happened in Atlantic City and the dump site, and the way the bodies were positioned and the way they were packaged. And I think we're going to find out. I think this is just really the tip of the iceberg, right? I know, Laura. Laura says, just imagine that you may have been in the same room as the most prolific serial killer. Yeah, it's crazy. I was in court one day, one of the early court appearances, and I went to a few of them, and he turned around and he looked right at me at one point, because it's not a very big courtroom, and I was sitting, I think, in the 3rd row, and it was chilling. It was chilling to look in the eyes of a suspected serial killer. Suspected. I have to say suspected, because he's not been convicted of anything yet, and innocent until proven guilty, all that good stuff. So let's take a look at the superseding indictment. This is going to replace the last indictment. You remember we did a show when he was indicted on the killing of Maureen Brainard-Barnes, who is the 4th of the Gilgo 4 women. And so that superseded the original indictment for the first 3. And now we have another superseding indictment, and they've added the next 2 charges. So let's take a look at that. We're going to read through it together. Save your questions maybe for the end so that I will be able to take a look at them. And this is, it's crazy. Our DA, the DA in Suffolk County, Ray Tierney, did a press conference yesterday where he talked about this a lot. Those of you who are watching probably have already seen it. So we knew that the grand jury was ongoing and that this investigation has not stopped, and there's still a Gilgo Beach task force that has been assembled to deal with only these cases, because remember, the earliest victim in these particular string of cases, in my opinion, is Karen Vergata, who goes back to 1996 when a pair of legs washed up on Fire Island in a trash bag, and then the rest of her remains were found many years later, around the same time, I think, as the Gilgo 4, 2010, 2011, which, remember, was precipitated by the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert. And I for one, still think Shannon Gilbert is somehow involved in this. I do not think that Shannon Gilbert was an accidental drowning, as they've tried to gaslight us into believing, because the similarities are just a little too much for me. So hopefully there was some forensic evidence found in Shannon Gilbert, and eventually she can be linked to this as well. I don't know what you guys think, but that is what I think. I do not think that Shannon Gilbert, especially with regard to her chilling 911 calls that she made, and all of the nefarious activities that may have been going on in that Oak Beach area, and the ties that Rex Heuermann may have to Oak Beach and to some people who lived there. And so this is just the tip of the iceberg, and rightfully so. Ray Tierney, our DA, has been close to the vest on this. And unfortunately, we lost Rodney Harrison as our police commissioner, but it seems that they're still working on it. So who knows? All right, here we go. This is the bail application that was filed. The arraignment on these charges was yesterday. So we're going to read through it, try and save your questions for the end. Let me just see if I have anything here that, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Says I sound great. Thanks, Stephanie, for being a member for 5 months. Nancy Rock, thanks for coming on and for all that you do. Thank you for your super chat. You guys, you Long Islanders, so many of you have been with me since the beginning, since I started doing shows with Duty Ron and Police Off the Cuff. And I thank you for that. Because this channel is not even a year old yet. We will have our 1-year anniversary in July. Keep it simple, Sassy Pants. Thanks for becoming a member. And Mama 4, 57 Rose. Thanks for your super sticker. And here we go. Supreme Court of Suffolk County, State of New York. The people of the state of New York against Rex Heuermann. On July 14th, 2023, defendant Rex Heuermann was charged by a grand jury with the following 6 counts, which had been incorporated in Suffolk County Indictment 71889-23. It's hard to believe this isn't even a year ago that he was arrested. Hard to believe. Murder in the first degree in violation of New York State Penal Law, Section 125.27, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Melissa Barthelemy on or about July 10th, 2009. Same charge in the first degree for the death of Megan Waterman on or about June 6th of 2010. Same charge in the first degree in the death of Amber Costello on or about September 2nd of 2010. Same charge in the second degree for Melissa Barthelemy on July 10th of 2009. So they're charging him with first and second degree for Melissa Barthelemy, and also for Megan Waterman, and also for Amber Costello. First and second degree. Second degree would be the lesser included. On January 16th of 2024, defendant Rex Heuermann was charged by the grand jury in a superseding indictment, Suffolk County Indictment number 70126-24, which incorporated not only the above counts, but the additional charge of murder in the second degree for the death of Maureen Brainard-Barnes on or about July 9th of 2007. So Maureen Brainard-Barnes, you may recall, was the earliest of the Gilgo 4. These are what they call the original Gilgo 4 to go missing. She went missing in 2010. And the last to go missing with regard to the Gilgo 4 was Amber Costello, who went missing in September of 2010. Now, you may recall, because we've been over this case a lot, but maybe you don't. The last person to see Amber Costello alive was a witness who identified the John. These were all escorts, sex workers, they call them. I like to say escorts, but in the document, you're going to see sex workers a lot. The witness in the Amber Costello case told law enforcement that there was a man who came to pick her up, a John, if you will, who was angry because the night before she and this witness had tried to swindle him out of the money that he came to pay her for her services, and when he stormed into the room and pretended to be a jealous boyfriend, chasing him away, keeping his money. And this person, who we believe to be Rex, was real angry. And he texted Amber the next day and said, I want my money back, kind of thing, or you come out with me tonight so I can get my money's worth. So she allegedly left her phone at home and left with this man, who the witness described as being an ogre-looking man, between 6'4" and 6'6", with thick glasses, and drove a green Chevy Avalanche. And that description of that person has been in the case file since 2010. Now, around that time when all of this was going on and this investigation was going on, Suffolk County had its own issues with regard to corruption and things such as like that, because our police chief, Jimmy Burke, had his own proclivities and his own perversions and his own addictions, and was not really happy about the fact he didn't want to let the FBI into this case, into these investigations. And so eventually he winds up going to jail, as did Tom Spota, who was the district attorney at the time, not for things related to the Gilgo cases, but for another incident involving James Burke and the cover-up of that incident. So Tom Spota, I believe, is still sitting in Club Fed, right? I'm trying to be nice, Darlene, I know. Tom Spota, the district attorney, I think he's in his 80s now. He's still sitting in Club Fed. James Burke was released from prison and has since been indicted on other charges involving, shall we say, perhaps soliciting services from men and exposing himself publicly at a memorial park in Suffolk County. Some of those charges were dropped, but those charges are still pending as far as I know. So that's interesting. He's out. Tom Spota is still in. So we know about cover-ups on Long Island. We've seen what happened in Suffolk County, and we believe it can happen. So for everyone who thinks or who thought, maybe now you're changing your minds on what's going on in the Karen Reed case out of Canton, Mass. We know firsthand here on Long Island how these things can actually happen. So I had been very vocal about the fact that I was pretty annoyed that we've had this description of this guy who's 6'4" to 6'6", driving a green Chevy Avalanche in the case file since 2010, and nobody was arrested in this case until 2023. And I took a lot of heat for that on some channels that I won't mention. Because let's face it, there's not a lot of guys who are between 6'4" and 6'6" that have a green Chevy Avalanche registered actually in their name. And a simple DMV search cross-check would have revealed that, but that's neither here nor there, because here we sit 14 years later and we finally have someone in custody. Now, perhaps they're going to be able to connect the dots on a bunch of other bodies, and some families can get some closure here, because that's really what it's about, is justice for these women and their families. So on January 16th of 2024, defendant Rex Heuermann was charged by the grand jury in a superseding indictment with another case number, which incorporated not only the above counts, but the additional charge of murder in the second degree in violation of New York State penal law for Maureen Brainard-Barnes in 2007. I think I just read that for the second time. Today, which was yesterday, defendant Rex Heuermann stands before this court charged by the grand jury in another superseding indictment, which incorporates each and every one of the above counts as well as the additional charges of murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Section 125.251, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Jessica Taylor on or about or between July 21 through 26 of 2003, and murder in the second degree in violation of New York State Penal Law Section 125.251, a Class A1 violent felony for the death of Sandra Costilla on or about and between November 19th and 20th of 1993. Okay, so now they're starting to connect him to cases, like I said, going all the way back to 1993. Rex Heuermann graduated from high school in 1981, which would make him around the age of 29, maybe, in 1993, 28 or 29. And we have all hypothesized together, that serial killers don't just start killing when they're in their 50s. Rex Heuermann is 60 years old right now as he sits out there in Riverhead in the Suffolk County Correctional Facility. Come back to the document. The people filed a written bail application at Rex Heuermann's initial arraignment, which occurred on July 14th of 2023, as well as at defendant's arraignment on the initial superseding indictment, which occurred on January 16th of 2024. Those applications are attached here too as Exhibit A. On July 14th of 2023, the Honorable Richard Ambro ordered that defendant Rex Heuermann be remanded without bail. The matter was subsequently adjourned to August 1st, 2023, before the Honorable Timothy P. Mazie. He pronounces that Mazie. I would say Mazie. They say Mazie. That's how they say it in court. On August 1st of 2023, and in the ensuing appearances that have followed, this court has continued to remand the defendant without bail. Break from the document to tell you, compare and contrast this case with the case of the Amityville butchers, who were let out with no bail and ankle monitors after dismembering 2 corpses and scattering the body parts throughout Long Island where high school children could find them. So rest easy knowing that Rex Heuermann, suspected Long Island serial killer, continues to remain behind bars without bail. Set forth below is the people's bail application in support of the new superseding indictment, which will expand on additional evidentiary developments in this investigation, now charging defendant Heuermann with the murders of 2 additional victims, Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costilla. Based on defendant Heuermann's indictment on additional murder charges, as it pertains to now a 5th and 6th victim, the serious and heinous nature of these serial murders, the planning and forethought that went into these crimes, the strength of the people's case, the length of incarceration the defendant faces upon conviction, the extended period of time that this defendant was able to avoid apprehension, and the remaining facts set forth herein and contained within Exhibit A, the people remain steadfast that the only means to ensure defendant Rex Heuermann's return to court is to remand him without bail. Fairy Raven, hello. I'm looking at you on my phone, so I can't highlight this, but there is no death penalty in New York. So no. Life in prison. And he's already 60. The 2003 and 2011 discovery of the human remains of Jessica Taylor. On or about July 26, 2023, an individual whose identity is known to law enforcement, herein witness 1, was walking his or her dog just west of Halsey Manor Road in Manorville, Suffolk County, New York. At that time, witness 1 observed what appeared to be human remains, which prompted him or her to call 911. Upon arrival, members of the Suffolk County PD observed the remains of a female, later identified as Jessica Taylor. Ms. Taylor was found lying on her back with her legs bent underneath her. I'm going to put a little trigger warning up. And there may be parts of this that I just read to you instead of putting on the screen so that I can. Somebody give me a trigger warning, please. Thank you, Princess Mish. How are you, Princess Mish? Upon arrival, members of the Suffolk County PD observed the remains of a female later identified as Jessica Taylor. Miss Taylor was found lying on her back with her legs bent underneath her. Notably, the victim was, let's say, had her head chopped off, and both of Miss Taylor's arms had been severed from her body below her elbows. Moreover, a tattoo on the victim's torso had been severely obliterated by a sharp object. Investigators believed the mutilation of the victim's tattoo, the chopping off of her head, and the removal of her limbs, of her arms, were acts perpetrated by Rex Heuermann to, inter alia, which is your Latin lesson of the day, among other things, inhibit the identification of the victim by facial recognition, fingerprints, and or tattoo identification. During the initial investigation in Manorville in 2003, the victim's head, arm, and hands were not found at the scene, and their location remained unknown to law enforcement for approximately 8 years. On March 29th of 2011, Miss Taylor's skull, hands, and forearm were discovered along Ocean Parkway just east of Gilgo Beach, Suffolk County, New York. Notably, Miss Taylor's remains were located on the same side of the road from where Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, here in the Gilgo 4, had been found just several months prior in December of 2010. Each of the Gilgo 4 victims, as well as the skull, hands, and forearm of Miss Taylor, were recovered on the same side of the road and at a depth of within 50 feet from the edge of the parkway. Furthermore, Miss Taylor's remains were located less than a mile from where the Gilgo 4 were discovered. See the image on the following page. Here is the image, which they have kindly enhanced for us. So pin number 1, which is down here, they say is less than a mile away. This is where Jessica Taylor's remains were found, 50 feet from the pavement. And then number 2 is right here, where there's the yellow push pin is. Maureen Brainard-Barnes was found 33 feet and 3 inches from the pavement. Melissa Barthelemy, who is icon number 3 here, was found 27 feet 2 inches from the pavement. Megan Waterman, marker number 4, was found 22 feet 9 inches from the pavement. And Amber Costello was found 29 feet 3 inches from the pavement. So the Gilgo 4 bodies were all found intact, wrapped in camouflage burlap, and secured with either belts or duct tape. Within those remains of the Gilgo 4, I believe, were found 3 female hairs on duct tape, which have been analyzed. The DNA has been compared to Heuermann's wife. They are to be, like a 99.99999% match. Then there was another hair found that was matched to Rex. Although to date, they do not think that Rex's wife is involved in this. Why so close to the pavement? This is bramble over on this side. So the south side of Ocean Parkway are some very beautiful beaches. Some of the best beaches, I would argue, in the world. I think they're always in the top 10. Robert Moses Beach, Cedar Beach, Ocean Beach, Gilgo Beach, and these are the ocean beaches. On the north side of Ocean Parkway, that's the bay side. And there's a lot of bramble there, which we've seen photos of. I don't know if I have any of it, but you can search for the photos, and it's very thick bramble. My theory has always been that he placed them there so he could drive by and do visits, but I don't know if we'll ever know what's in this guy's head. And maybe that's why he placed them so close to the roadway so he could visit them. Information relevant to the disappearance of Jessica Taylor. Jessica Taylor was last seen on or about July 19th, 2003 in New York City. The investigation to date has established that in July of 2003, Ms. Taylor was working as a sex worker in the area of Midtown Manhattan. On July 21st of 2003, at approximately 8:41 p.m., Ms. Taylor utilized her cellular phone, hereinafter the Taylor phone, to speak to her mother. Based on witness interviews and analysis of telephone records, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has learned that the two spoke for approximately 7 minutes. During that call, Ms. Taylor had arranged to visit her mother on July 25th of 2003 in Poughkeepsie, New York for her mother's birthday. Less than 2 hours later, at approximately 10:22 p.m., the Taylor phone placed an outgoing call, which lasted approximately 2 minutes. Thereafter, the Taylor phone records revealed no further outgoing calls or accepted incoming calls. So that was the last time her phone ever made a call, was July 25th of 2003. That's how they're estimating the date of her death. On or about July 25th, 2003, when her daughter failed to arrive at her Poughkeepsie residence or answer any phone calls, Ms. Taylor's mother notified law enforcement. So she was reported missing July 25th. At the time of Ms. Taylor's disappearance, Rex Heuermann worked in the same vicinity as where Ms. Taylor was known to street walk, i.e., work as a sex worker. Records seized during the execution of the prior search warrants reveal Heuermann was in fact present in Midtown Manhattan on July 21 of 2003, the same date that Ms. Taylor disappeared. On July 26 of 2003, and in the days thereafter, members of the Suffolk County PD canvassed the area around Halsey Manor Road, Manorville, in the vicinity of where Ms. Taylor's remains had been found. As a result, investigators spoke to a witness who had, on July 25th of 2003, at approximately 10:30 p.m., observed a dark-colored Chevrolet pickup truck backed into the same wooded area where Ms. Taylor's body was later found. Based upon their investigation, law enforcement officers determined that these observations would have occurred approximately 13 hours before Witness 1's 911 call. Notably, the investigation to date has established that defendant Heuermann purchased a 2002 dark-colored Chevy Avalanche pickup truck on or about March 22nd, 2002, from Ramp Chevrolet in Port Jefferson Station, New York. Not great advertising for Ramp Chevrolet. I don't know if they're still in business, but maybe you don't want your brand mentioned in these documents. But in any event, I'll just break from this to tell you that this is the same Chevy Avalanche that was seized by law enforcement in 2023 that I believe he gave to his brother, right? The green one. So Suffolk County PD and the task force went all the way down there to, is it South Carolina or North Carolina? Chester, I think. Chester, South Carolina, to collect that truck, and it was still in the family. He's like, here you go, bro. Take it. Take this truck. Take the murder truck. Accordingly, on July 25th, 2003, at 10:30 p.m., defendant Heuermann would have been in possession of a vehicle matching the description of the one observed in the vicinity of where Ms. Taylor's remains had been found on Halsey Manor Road. Forensic analysis of Rex Heuermann's digital devices also revealed the following. 1. That on or about July 28th of 2003, Rex Heuermann accessed a Newsday article entitled, "Cops Seek Help in IDing Manorville Body," regarding the discovery of Ms. Taylor's human remains. That online activity was subsequently deleted. And 2, on or about July 29th of 2003, Rex Heuermann conducted an internet search for a new Chevy Avalanche, despite his 2002 Avalanche being just over 1 year old. See embedded image below. The analysis further shows Heuermann also attempted to delete this search for a new vehicle. Notably, this activity occurred just days after Miss Taylor was discovered and just days after witnesses observed a vehicle matching the physical description of Heuermann's leaving the scene. I'm going to break from this for 1 second to tell my Karen Reed friends that going all the way back to 2003, law enforcement can still figure out whether you deleted a Google search. So if you don't think the technology is better now than it was in 2003, I got news for you. Lost long to dying cold. Notably, this activity occurred just days after Miss Taylor was discovered and just days after witnesses observed a vehicle matching the physical description of Heuermann's leaving the scene. Here, my friends, is a search for a 2003 Chevy Avalanche in arrival blue. That's the color he was looking at. And all the way back then, the MSRP on that vehicle was $40,572 back in 2003. So a little over 20 years ago. I wonder what the MSRP is on that vehicle now. Just curious. I don't know how much more it could be than 40,000. Maybe I'm wrong. I've never shopped for one. Do they even still make a Chevy Avalanche? I don't know. But apparently it is the serial killer car of choice. Somebody, can't remember who, was it Jason Smith? Are you here, Jason? Sent me once a diagram of the Chevy Avalanche and why it was the car of choice. Because it has hidden compartments and stuff, and like, it's crazy. Finally, while the make and model of the vehicle Heuermann searched for is the same as his 2002 Chevy Avalanche pickup truck, the exterior color is different, i.e. arrival blue. See the image below, here it is. As well as another in Summit White, which are significantly brighter exterior paint offerings by Chevy when compared to Heuermann's dark green 2002 Chevy Avalanche. That's why he gave it to his brother and he got himself a lighter color because the witness saw a dark colored Chevy Avalanche. Ta-da! Hairs recovered from the remains of Jessica Taylor. During the course of this investigation, Miss Taylor's body was examined by a forensic scientist within the Suffolk County Crime Lab, which revealed that Miss Taylor had been her head taken off, her arms below her elbows were taken off, and revealed irregular disruption of the victim's, I'm going to say nips, if you know what I mean, and the obliteration of her tattoo. During the examination of Miss Taylor's body, a male human hair was recovered, specifically from a surgical drape that had been underneath the victim. Hereinafter, male hair underneath Taylor. A subsequent examination of the male hair underneath Taylor led to the determination that it was a human head hair with Caucasian European characteristics. However, it was based on the DNA testing capabilities at the Suffolk County Crime Lab, unsuitable for further DNA testing at that time, back in 2003. A surgical drape. Is a surgical drape one of those paper things that you get like in a doctor's office to cover your knees? If anybody knows exactly what a surgical drape is or would have been in 2003, that's interesting to me. On or about August 24 of 2023, so this is 20 years later, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the male hair underneath Taylor to an outside forensics laboratory. Somebody says, yes, it's similar. Sounds like it. Somebody says plastic tarp with a paper back. Oh, I know, Wendy, what you're talking about. Yeah. Or would that be a gown? I'm right about the surgical drape. Is it paper? Maybe back in 2003. It can be paper. Sometimes that has a hole. Okay. Interesting. Carrie says, yay for the advancement of DNA technology. That's right. So they took the hair and 20 years later, to a lab which specializes in forensic mitochondrial analysis. On or about February 1 of 2024, Forensic Lab number 2, issued a report concluding that the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from the male hair underneath Taylor and the profile developed from defendant's buccal swab. Is it okay? Anybody know for sure? Is it buccal swab or buccal swab? The correct pronunciation of that word. Some people say buccal swab, some people say buccal swab, and I just need to know what the right pronunciation is. And I think we're probably all going to disagree on it. But in any event, it's a swab from inside of your cheek. So remember, they took a swab from inside of Heuermann's cheek. They got a warrant to do that because they wanted to connect him. It's buccal. People say buccal. I know. Why does everybody else say buccal? Buccal. Both are correct. Buccal, buccal. It's a swab from inside the cheek. The prosecution in this case got a warrant to get Rex's buccal swab to compare it with the DNA on the pizza crust from the box that he threw away. And they got it. So lab number 2 developed a profile saying that defendant's buccal swab and the profile developed from the hair underneath Taylor were the same, specifically at a rate that would, as per the MPOP database, exclude 99.96 of the North American population as the contributor of said hair recovered underneath the decapitated and dismembered remains of Jessica Taylor. While 99.96 of the North American population can be excluded as the contributor of the male hair underneath Taylor, defendant Heuermann cannot be excluded as the contributor of the said hair recovered under the remains of Jessica Taylor. So just to get an idea of that, with regard to the disruption of Ms. Taylor's nips, we're going to say, witnesses from the Suffolk County ME's office have determined that the irregular disruption of those body parts did not occur naturally, and one possible cause of that is the post-mortem mutilation of that part of her body. And for those of you wondering, MPOP is shorthand for the European DNA Profile Group Mitochondrial DNA Population Database, which is a web-based collection of human mitochondrial sequence data from various populations worldwide. The North American database includes 12,386 sequences of North American forensic significance. So pretty much it's a match. On or about March 8th of 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the male hair underneath Taylor and a DNA extract of Rex Heuermann's buccal swab to an outside independent laboratory, which they are calling Forensic Lab 1, which applies DNA techniques and direct genome sequencing in difficult-to-solve forensic casework and the identification of human remains. On or about April 29th of 2024, Forensic Lab 1 issued a report indicating it had developed a nuclear DNA profile for not only the male hair underneath Taylor, but also from Rex Heuermann's buccal swab. Forensic Lab 1 was then able to conduct a one-to-one autosomal nuclear DNA comparison between said profile to Rex Heuermann's SNP genotype profile developed from his buccal swab, which resulted in the conclusion that the DNA profile generated from the male hair underneath Taylor is 1.837 times 10 to the 603rd power times more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Rex Heuermann's SNP genotype file than from an unrelated individual. And for those of you who are wondering how big that number is, footnote 3 tells us that the 1.837 times 10 to the 603rd power statistic is the number 1,837 with 600 zeros after it. 600 zeros. Based on the foregoing, it is significant that 2 forensic labs have now independently determined that the aforementioned hair recovered from the surgical drape under the remains of Jessica Taylor are substantially more likely to have derived from a person genetically identical to defendant Heuermann's mitochondrial and nuclear profiles, which further support that Rex Heuermann murdered, dismembered, decapitated, and transported the remains of Jessica Taylor to Manorville and Gilgo Beach until the victims' remains were ultimately discovered in July of 2003 and March of 2011, respectively. So let's just break for a minute to talk about the fact that over 20 years later, right, they are able to make that DNA match with regard to a single hair on the body of Jessica Taylor, whereas the testing in the Karen Reed case, and I'm just going to use this as a comparison. Oh, Collier Landry is here. Hello, Collier. I'm going to be on Collier's show soon. We just have to figure out a time to tape it. How about I'll reach out to you after this is over and we will talk about that. He says, hi Melanie, this case is so wild and tragic. Thanks for covering. Yeah, it's you know what, Collier, I've been living with this case since 1996. And at that time I had 2 young children. These are the beaches that I would take my kids to. So this is especially personal for me and for all of us who live here, because people have been trying to gaslight us into thinking there's more than one serial killer roaming these parts and dumping bodies in the same parts. And we refuse to believe it. So this is some kind of validation for us, at least anyway, somewhat. DNA doesn't lie, nanny goat. Right, but in the Karen Reed case, they're saying that, that hair was degraded so badly, they had to send it out to Bodie Labs and they couldn't get. I mean, we're looking at this case, he's being indicted on a murder from over 20 years ago. Based on a hair that was found over 20 years ago. Like, it can be done. Don't gaslight us into thinking it can't be done. Yep, Brooklyn Paisola, they got that guy. So here's the how they are going to further connect him to these murders. And with regard to the Heuermann's family travel in relation to the disappearance of Jessica Taylor. As part of the ongoing investigation, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has also established that Heuermann's wife and children were out of state at the time of Miss Taylor's disappearance and murder, a consistent theme attributable to the defendant for each of the charged homicides thus far, which would have allowed the defendant unfettered time and opportunity to execute these crimes. Specifically, in 2002 to 2003, defendant Heuermann's daughter, Victoria, was a kindergarten student at the McKenna Elementary School located in Massapequa Park, New York. At the time, Victoria was classmates with an individual whose identity is also known to law enforcement, hereinafter witness number 2. Based on post-arrest interviews with witnesses, including witness 2's family and Victoria Heuermann, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has learned that at the conclusion of the kindergarten school year, Ms. Ellerup and her 2 children vacationed with witness 2's family from on or about July 20th of 2003 through on or about July 27th, 2003 at Smuggler's Notch Resort, which is located in Jeffersonville, Vermont. Rex Heuermann did not attend this trip. Shout out to Smuggler's Notch. Anybody ever been there? It's a great family ski resort. Who, again, probably doesn't want the brand involvement with this case, but here we are. These witness accounts have been corroborated via telephone records and electronic data seized during the execution of the July 2023 search warrants. For example, agents of the Gilgo Homicide Task Force seized AT&T records which detail calls made to and from the Heuermann residence in July of 2003. These records showed that during the aforementioned family vacation, the landline telephone associated with the Heuermann residence, which was located at 105 First Avenue, Massapequa Park, hereinafter called the Target Residence, made several phone calls to a telephone number bearing an 802 area code. Further investigation has tied this phone number to Smuggler's Notch Resort. Thus, investigators believe that defendant Heuermann made these calls from the Target residence in Massapequa Park to his family staying in Jeffersonville, Vermont. We have heard talk about there potentially being some sort of hoarding going on in that Massapequa Park house. We've heard from people who have searched it. We've heard from news media outlets that there was a lot of clutter in that house. And These phone records were recovered from inside the house. This guy held on to every piece of paper ever. Like, he still had his long distance phone bills back when long distance phone bills were a thing, going all the way back to 2003. And that's how they found this information, because I don't even know if this information would still be held internally in AT&T. I don't know what their retention policies are, but this is insane. Yes, 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 Lisa. Lisa Amore. Rex the ogre was also a hoarder, great for the investigators. Yeah, he's burying himself with all of the information that he kept. So here's the long distance bill from AT&T from July and August of 2003. And they've got the calls that he made on July 22nd, 26th to Smuggler's Notch, back when a 16-minute phone call from Long Island to Vermont would cost you $5.60. Anybody remember about getting in trouble for long distance phone bills when you were a teenager? Crazy that he kept this stuff. And that's why we saw them leaving during the first search with boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes, tons of boxes, because this guy kept everything, seems. Everything. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force also seized phone records attributable to Heuermann's Manhattan business, RH Consultants and Associates. These records further corroborate Heuermann's stay in New York and the family's travel to Jeffersonville, Vermont, as Heuermann's work landline makes numerous calls during the same week of July 20th to 27th, 2003, from Manhattan to the Smuggler's Notch resorts. He didn't just keep his home records, kept his business records too. And here's a bunch of calls from July 21st to 24th to Smuggler's Notch. Looks like he had a better rate on his long distance bill at work than he did at home. McGraw Communications, I don't even know who that is. Must have been some other long distance provider at the time. Finally, in July of 2023, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force seized a hard drive from the basement of the target residence. An extraction and analysis of that hard drive revealed that it contained a Palm Pilot backup file, which appeared to contain defendant Heuermann's date book or calendar for the relevant dates. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force subsequently hired a digital forensics expert who, by utilizing native Palm software, was able to convert the above data into a readable format. Who remembers the Palm Pilot? I had a Palm Pilot. Mm-hmm. And here's his date book. And this is where my Long Island friends, I need you to help me with this, because there's some things on here that I want to ask you about. But so here in his Palm Pilot date book for the week of, or from July 11th of 2003 to July 27th of 2003, you can see these entries: wife in Vermont at Smugs from Sunday to Sunday, July 20th to 27th of 2003. Now, here's my question to my Long Island friends, or anybody who may be a gun enthusiast or a shooter or somebody who does target practice or whatever. Every Sunday, he seems to go to Camp Smith, and it says Camp Smith match, as if he had some sort of a shooting match or some sort of a tournament. July 13th. And then the next Sunday would be July 20th, was High Power Peconic. I tried to do some Googling on this, and High Power was another sort of competition. There, I believe there is a gun club in Peconic, which is out east, Long Island. Here's a PPC match, and that may explain they recovered something like 297 guns from the basement vault or gun room at his house during the original searches in July of 2023. And Camp Smith again on Sunday, July 27th. So he had standing reservations at Camp Smith, and then this high power. Anybody know? I think it was a gun club. Darlene said that. I think it still may be. I think there still may be one out in Peconic. Hello, Scott says the camp is a training site for the National Guard. Yeah, but can somebody like him get on there? And do they have matches for the general public? Target shooting? I'm not sure. Hello, ATS News. Hello. Gun shows? No, I don't know if it was a gun show because it says it says match, as if there was some sort of a match. Yes. Kathy says, I'm pretty sure there's a Peconic sports club in Riverhead. Right? So Brooklyn Paizola, yeah, says this Palm Pilot is great because you can match it up to the city's Department of Building online permit site and see where he's working. Exactly. And he's got all of those appointments in there as well. If you look, Friday, July 11th, meet Bill Irons at 25 Broadway for 4th floor. So he was doing something at 25 Broadway on the 4th floor. Then he's got an inspection at 103rd Avenue for elevator number 8 shaft for steel. Meet Kenny at Mainco Elevator. Here's one set up for 609 Greenwich Street meeting. 1120 and 1140 Bronx Department of Buildings for Kingsbridge. I think that's the Kingsbridge or the Knightsbridge complex. And here's another 83 Maiden Lane project, phase 1, 609 Greenwich Street. So we can see all the projects that he was working. And who's this? Pick up Derek at 6 a.m. for airport. He's got doctor's appointments. I mean, this guy kept everything. Imagine how long that it's going to take to go through all of this stuff. Okay, so Scott, my moderator, just sent me something. There's a Long Island Gun Club in Massapequa where they have a senior club and some other clubs. There are a lot of gun clubs on Long Island, right? I know there's one also like on Center Island over by Bayville. I know there's one, there's a range out right by, coincidentally, Suffolk County Correctional Facility in Yaphank, or in like on the way to Riverhead, where Rex is currently being housed. But here's something interesting too. On Sunday, July 27th of 2003 at 10 a.m., while his wife is in Vermont at Smugs, he's got Derek coming to the house to cut a 6x6 post on a bandsaw. What was he building? I have questions. I have a lot of questions. Imagine the job of going through all of these hard drives. The number of electronic devices that they seized during the first search was crazy. And during this recent 6 or 7 day search, they came out with a whole lot of other stuff. Is Derek involved? Says Greg Hallart. I don't know. He is one of the dumbest criminals ever. I know, he kept everything. So we were thinking maybe it was the wife that was the hoarder. Maybe it was, we didn't know. Hello, Broken Baker, and their viewers have just joined. Say hello, hello. Thanks for coming in, you guys. We're looking at the superseding indictment for Rex Heuermann. Many of my viewers are right here on Long Island, where I am located. And we've been dealing with these body parts since 1996, so this is a very happy day for us. The indictment goes on to say, based on the foregoing, the investigation to date has clearly established defendants Heuermann's wife and children were indeed located out of the state during the time Jessica Taylor's disappearance, which occurred on or about July 21 of 2003. Accordingly, the murders of all 4 charged victims, and now the murder of Miss Taylor, occurred at times when defendant Heuermann's wife and children were located out of state, which would have allowed defendant Heuermann unfettered time to execute his plans for Miss Taylor, which included the taking of her head, the taking of her arms, and transportation of her remains without any fear that his family would uncover or learn of his involvement in these crimes. And remember, I'm just going to break from the document for a moment to say that during his initial arraignment on the first three of the Gilgo Four, even though Asa's hair, his wife, was deemed to be a match to three of those female hairs found on three of the Gilgo Four, law enforcement has been saying all along that we don't believe that she was involved because she was out of town, and we can guarantee she was out of town during those times. And John Ray here, who is on Long Island, who's been representing the family of Shannon Gilbert since 2010, has been, screaming that we can't say that she's not involved. How could you say she's not involved? You can't prove that we don't know. We don't know if he kept these women for any period of time. We don't know exactly when the taking of their lives occurred. They can't really be pinpointed. We know when they went missing. We know when they were found, but we don't know what happened in between. And what we're going to read here, it's going to give us a little more unfortunate insight into what this potential monster may have been doing with these women. Back to the document. The 1993 discovery of the human remains of Sandra Costilla. On or about November 20th, 1993, two individuals, while hunting in a wooded area of Southampton, in the vicinity of 50 Old Fish Cove Road, North Sea, Suffolk County, New York, discovered the remains of Sandra Costilla, date of birth 8/25/65. The victim, who had been 28 years old at the time, was laying on her back with her arms outstretched over her head, with her uncovered legs spread apart. The victim's shirt had been pulled up over her torso and head, exposing the victim's top of her body, if you will. The victim had numerous sharp force injuries to, among other things, her face, torso, her top and bottom private parts, let's say, and left thigh. Miss Costilla was a native of Trinidad and Tobago, but had been living in New York prior to her disappearance and murder. Hairs recovered from the remains of Sandra Costilla. During the course of the 1993 investigation, Miss Costilla's body was examined by a forensic scientist with the Suffolk County Crime Lab, which led to the recovery of, among other things, 3 hairs from the victim's remains, one from the victim's right arm, hereinafter female hair on Costilla, one from a tape lift of the striped shirt above the victim's head, hereinafter male hair on Costilla, as well as one from a tape lift on the white shirt above the victim's head, hereinafter unidentified female hair on Costilla, collectively hairs on Costilla. Swiper, keep swiping, keep swiping. That's not a stream unless I swipe out. StreamYard. Don't worry, I know exactly where I was. Always come back. Always come back. Thank you. I was in here looking for a trigger warning in my banners, and then I couldn't find one, and then I went like this, and then I just disappeared. So let me just do a trigger warning. And there we go. All right, cool. Let's see if we can make this a little more. All right, that's good for now. All right, so on Sandra Costilla's body, they found 3 hairs. 2 female hairs and a male hair. In 2014, well before the identification of Rex Heuermann as a suspect in Miss Costilla's murder, The hairs on Costilla were sent to Forensic Lab 2, which was able to develop unique mitochondrial DNA profiles for each of the hairs on Costilla. On or about August 1 of 2014, Forensic Lab 2 received an extract of John Bittrolf's buccal swab. Forensic Laboratory number 2 was then able to develop a mitochondrial DNA profile from John Bittrolf's buccal swab and subsequently compared it to the mitochondrial DNA profiles that had been previously generated for each of the hairs on Costilla. At the conclusion of its analysis, Forensic Lab 2 was able to exclude John Bittrolf and his maternal relatives as contributors of the hair on Costilla. If anybody knows who John Bittrolf is, you can put it in the chat for the other chatters who do not know who John Bittrolf is. John Bittrolf is sitting in prison right now for the deaths of 2 women. I think it was in and around that time that he was convicted, right? 2014, you guys. And he swears he's innocent. His relatives swear that he's innocent. And I had looked into this at one time with, I believe it's Benson, our favorite armchair detective, and OSINT Pro, because I had the feeling that maybe, or I still think maybe, I mean, I don't know. What do I know? John Bittrolf could be connected to that Rex Heuermann could be connected to the Bittrolf victims in some way. So I don't know about that. Yeah, he's convicted for 2 women in Manorville. They also were escorts, let's say. And he swears he didn't do it. He swears that he did perhaps hire their services, but that he did not take their lives. And I don't know. I would like to do a deeper dive into Bittrolf one day, if you guys are interested in that, because I find it to be really interesting, that case. And there are people who have written to me who swear that they know him and that he did not do it. So I think it's interesting. I have questions. Remember when your internet was really slow and Millie Little Stream would just drop? She would be talking and then just pink sparkle. Oh, is it your internet that's slow or mine? I've got the Ethernet on, but you know what? I'm not that happy with Verizon right now either. So hang on a second, because I think I found the problem. Huh. What is the problem here? It's not the right camera. All right, wait. Give me 1 second, because I think it's my adapter that's plugged into my computer that may be crapped out. Like maybe there was a power surge or something. Just give me 1 second. This is really going to I don't know. I don't know. I mean, my avatar won't even work right now. Can you hear me though? Don't worry, I'm whatever. I'm here. We're just gonna keep going. We'll just make the document full screen. Can you still hear me if I do that? You don't get to look at me today anymore because StreamYard blows. For all the amount of money that they charge me monthly to use this stupid thing, you would think maybe they could get their act together, but no. But no. So I'm just a black box today. All right, here we go. John Bitroff, anyway, was convicted of killing 2 women. He sits in jail. People think he's innocent. I don't know. So he was excluded from the hairs on Costilla, but recently the Gilgo Homicide Task Force requested Forensic Lab number 2 undergo forensic testing, specifically comparing mitochondrial DNA profiles for each of the hairs on Costilla, which had been developed back in 2014, prior to Heuermann emerging as a suspect in Miss Costilla's murder, to known samples provided by the Gilgo Homicide Task Force. On or about February 29th of 2024, Forensic Lab number 2 issued a report concluding that the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from the male hair on Costilla and the profile developed from the defendant's buccal swab are the same, specifically at a rate that would, as per the MPOP database, going through all of those calculations, be about the same as 99.96% belonging to Rex Heuermann. Prior to Ms. Costilla's disappearance and murder, defendant Heuermann had been living with a female individual whose identity is known to law enforcement, hereinafter witness number 3. During the course of the investigation, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force was able to secure a buccal swab from witness 3, which was secured via her consent. I don't know if this was his first wife. I'm curious about this because I think we know that he married Asa in something like 1996, but his first marriage was to a woman, I think, named Elizabeth. And I don't recall if he was married in 91 or if he was living with a different woman in 1993. If anybody knows, you can let me know in the chat. On or about March 29th of 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a DNA extract of witness number 3's buccal swab to forensic lab number 2 for further analysis. On or about May 8th of 2024, forensic lab number 2 issued a report concluding that the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from witness 3's buccal swab and the profile developed from the female hair on Costilla share a common base at all compared positions. Specifically, all those calculations that are too big for me to wrap my head around would be exclude 99.98% of the North American population as the contributor to the hair recovered on the mutilated remains of Sandra Costilla. So the thing that is in common with the Gilgo 4 and Sandra Costilla is that the women who were living in the house with Rex Heuermann at the time, all of their hairs were found on the Gilgo 4 and on Sandra Costilla. So even though witness 3, who had but no longer resided at the target residence prior to Miss Costilla's disappearance and murder, cannot be excluded as the contributor of said hair recovered on Miss Costilla. On or about March 8th of 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the hairs on Costilla, as well as a DNA extract of witness number 3's buccal swab to the forensic lab. And again, they're going to say that those hairs are a match, the male hair and the female hair, with regard to the woman who was living with Rex Heuermann at the time of Sandra Costilla's death, or had just lived with him around that time. So they looked at the nuclear DNA profiles and the mitochondrial DNA profiles, and they're a match. Both of them individually, both labs matched both hairs to both witness number 3, who had resided at the target residence prior to Miss Costilla's disappearance and murder, and Rex Heuermann's hair. The foregoing further provides support that Rex Heuermann mutilated, murdered, and transported the body of Sandra Costilla to Southampton. And here is, there's a chart here with regard to all of the forensics in each of the 6 victims and all of the hairs that tied back to Heuermann or individuals with whom Heuermann resided, which lends further support to the conclusion that the defendant Heuermann is the individual who murdered, stripped, restrained, and transported the remains of Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costilla, as well as the Gilgo 4, until they each were discovered in 1993, 2003, 2010, and 2011. And I'll leave this up for a second in case you want to come back and look at it later. You can screenshot the chart if you like, but I don't think we need to read it together. Heuermann's unfettered access to the target residence during the disappearance and murder of Miss Sandra Costilla. As noted above, based on post-arrest interviews with witnesses, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has learned that witness 3 and defendant Heuermann began living together at target residence in 1991. In September of 1993, approximately 2 months before Miss Costilla's disappearance and murder, witness 3 moved out of the target residence. Prior to witness 3 leaving the target residence, Heuermann's mother had moved out of the target residence. Wonder if that was a trigger for him. If whoever this woman was, whether it was his first wife or a live-in girlfriend at the time, if that triggered him and sent him on this spree of going out to target Sandra Costilla. Based on the foregoing, neither Heuermann's mother nor witness 3 were living at the target residence during the time of Sandra Costilla's murder. Accordingly, the murders of all 4 charged victims, and now the murders of Miss Taylor and Miss Costilla, occurred at times when defendant Heuermann would have had unfettered time to execute his plans for each victim without any fear that his family or others residing at the target residence would uncover or learn of his involvement in these crimes. Newly discovered digital evidence. As detailed in Exhibit A following Heuermann's arrest, numerous search warrants were executed at the target residence, which culminated in, among other things, the seizure of over 350 electronic devices. This guy held on to everything. 300 and no sound, really? Okay, now is there sound? What, because I take off the black box that's supposed to have my avatar on it that doesn't have my avatar on it? Thanks, Scott. All right, so MPP2 says, first marriage in 1990 didn't last long. Nothing mentioned how long. We know her name is Elizabeth, and we know that I had their original wedding announcement somewhere, but I thought they lived in New Jersey, so I don't know if they lived in that house in Massapequa. But I thought it was, yeah. So if he got married in 1990, I thought it was like a 3-year marriage, and then he married Asa in 1996, so that may have been his first wife. That's why they're not mentioning her in these papers. Thanks. In the months subsequent to Heuermann's arrest, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has attempted to extract and analyze data from each of these devices. An analysis of these devices has revealed Heuermann's significant collection of violent, okay, the trigger warning is up, so here it is. Violent bondage and torture P, currently dating back to 1994. So based on the analysis of the electronics that they've looked at so far, they've only gone back to 1994 with this disgusting, filthy torture type materials that he liked to view for pleasure. The images accessed by Heuermann included, but are not limited to, mutilation of the top part of a woman's body and bottom private parts of a woman's body, substitution, which is what they're calling, let's say, invasion with an object instead of actual intercourse, and the fetishes of doing things with women who have no head, bondage and whipping, which notably and largely coincide with how the remains of Sandra Costilla, Jessica Taylor, and Valerie Mack were discovered, which again goes back to my theory that perhaps he kept these women somewhere for a certain period of time and did things to them. And based on the recent search of his home, again, I think the DA, Ray Tierney, did indicate that he found some things behind some paneling in the basement that would indicate that perhaps they were held there. And we talked about that room where the guns were, and originally they called it something like a vault. And then people were saying, no, it was just to hold the guns in. Well, I disagreed, because they also said they found a mattress in the vault. So seems like these things happened in the house when the family was not around. Moreover, during the analysis of a hard drive recovered from the basement of Heuermann's residence, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force recently discovered a Microsoft Word document entitled HK 2002-04. The document was discovered in an unallocated space. Allocated space refers to stored data that a computer is using, files that are viewable and able to be opened by a user. On the other hand, unallocated space refers to available or unstructured data, which is not readily viewable and able to be opened by a user. Unallocated space frequently contains room for new data or old data that has been deleted, sent to the recycle bin, overwritten, etc. For example, when a user deletes data, many users believe the file has been purged forever. However, deleting a file only tells the computer that the space previously occupied by that file is now available. The deleted data will remain in unallocated space until another file is written over it. Data contained within unallocated space can be retrieved via a computer forensic extraction method called file carving. A forensic analysis of the HK 2002-04 document reveals that it was not only a locally created draft that is not downloaded from the internet, but also recovered from a hard drive that indicates it was utilized by Heuermann himself. While the original document appears to have been created in the year 2000, based on its original title, HK 2000-03, this iteration of the Word document, titled HK 2002-2004, appears to have been created and modified between 2001 and 2002. Based on the foregoing and the facts set forth herein, the task force members believe 2000 or 2002 to be a reference to calendar years. Wait, why did it just, okay. The task force members also believe, based on the foregoing and the facts set forth herein, the Microsoft Word document to be a planning document utilized by Heuermann to methodically blueprint and plan out his kills, hereinafter referred to as the HK planning document. Attached here too as Exhibit B. The HK planning document begins with a 4-category section with the underlined headings of problems, supplies, DS, and TRG. Here it is, folks. Here's the MS Word document that this sick SOB created to plan his kills. On the left, you see a list of problems. Problems include DNA, tire marks, blood stains, fingerprints, MO, and then next to that in parentheses is plastic bag/cat litter, witness, trace source of supplies, foot and shoe prints, photos, and then there's a word MISS leaders, LEADERS, police stop, truck stuck, fingerprints in gloves, plastic bags matched to box, hair and fiber. Those would be all the problems that he's trying to avoid. Under supplies, let me full screen this for a second so it's easier for you guys to read, but you can't because then you won't be able to hear me. Okay. Under supplies, it says booties, lye, which he misspells. I'm sure he's talking about the chemical. He spells it LIE. I believe it's spelled LYE /acid. Police scanner, which is also spelled with only one N. I thought this guy was intelligent. I thought he was an architect. I thought he had some intelligence, but there's so many misspelled words in here that I don't know if it's intentional or if he doesn't have spell check back in 2000 when he created this doc or what's going on. But in addition to police scanner, he's got rope/cord, saw/cutting tools, hairnets, photo film. Oh, so that indicates to me that he wanted to take pictures or that he did take pictures. And maybe they found some pictures in his treasure trove of all the boxes that they took out of there. Somebody put in here, I think he is definitely the Bronx butcher. And it went by so fast that I did not highlight it. So that's an interesting thought. A lot of people have made that connection as well. But the photo film is interesting to me. Burn can, foam drain cleaner, body wash and wipes, tarps, and then it says drop clothes, but I think he means to say drop cloths, medical gloves, bags/tape, large electrical clips, ratched cargo strap. Under DS, which stands for dump sites, folks. Dump site 1 is Mill Road. Dump site 2 has question marks. Dumpster site. And then it says next time, recon dumpster locations. So that indicates to me that when he created this document, wasn't his first time, because it says next time, recon dumpster locations. This is the 2002 to 4 document, but remember, it was created originally in 2000. And he's just been indicted on a 1993 case. TRG, which I believe means target. And then it says target 1, Megan, question mark. And then the DA said at his press conference, he did not think that meant Megan Waterman, because this goes back to 2004, and Megan Waterman did not go missing, or her remains were found in 2010. So he thinks it's not Megan Waterman. I don't know if anybody has any information on that, how long he may have been targeting Megan Waterman. That would be interesting. Small is good. Target unknown, and then parentheses, it says black. Evil Queen Yaya says not his first time. Great success, says he was deranged. I think we can all agree there. Young Black Economist says in 2001, yeah, maybe spell check was an extra fee. Shaking my head. Criminals always act cheap, and not from a lack of means, but a lack of morals. Yeah. This is sick. Brooklyn Paisola, this is sick. Yes. Yes. Casarija says the neighbors said he used a burn can in his backyard. That's right. He was burning things all the time. And in fact, recently when John Ray came forward with some new information with regard to Karen Vergata, didn't the woman who said that she accompanied her detective, her NYPD police officer boyfriend, and who they believe is Karen Vergata, to Rex Heuermann's house around Valentine's Day in 1996, say that he was burning things in the backyard? That witness said that, I believe. Interesting. Based on the Gilgo Homicide Task Force's training and experience, the members believe problems to be a guide on issues to avoid apprehension, supplies to be a reference to what supplies are needed to carry out the serial murders, to avoid apprehension, and to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. The DS heading appears to be an acronym for dump site, which is corroborated by, among other things, the discoveries of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor at 2 separate dump sites. That is the vicinity of Mill Road and Ocean Parkway. Under that same heading is a note regarding dumpster sites, which the task force members believe is a reference to how Heuermann disposed of physical evidence in the manner described herein. See, dispose of the following section below. TRG appears to be a reference to target or victim. It is important to note that the known victims thus far are all petite women, which is consistent with the small is good entry in the document, lending further support to the aforementioned conclusions that TRG refers to victims or targets. Here's Aunt Bibi with the info. Rex purchased the house for $170,000 from his mom in 1994. Yeah, but he lived there his whole entire life, right? And it said in this document that his mom had just moved out around that time of late 1993, right? So then maybe he bought it after she moved out. But I believe he lived there his entire life, except for maybe when he was in college, or maybe for a little period of time during his first marriage when he may or may not have lived in New Jersey. We don't have any real clarity on that. So again, here's the dump sites. Number 1 is Mill Road. Number 2, questionable, and then dumpster site. Small is good, and Megan as targets. With regards to the DS section of the document, it's important to note that human remains of Jessica Taylor, discovered in 2009, as well as the remains of Valerie Mack, discovered in 2000, were dumped in 2 locations. One of those locations being the vicinity of Mill Road, which is listed as dump site 1, Mill Road, in the above Word document. So breaking from the document for a second to tell you that I think Valerie Mack will be the next victim that he's connected to. There's too many coincidences here. Like people like to say, Occam's razor, right? Two serial killers dumping in the same locations like Gilgo Beach along Ocean Parkway and those woods in Manorville would be just a little too much of a coincidence for me. And I like to think that maybe we have the right guy in jail and we don't need to start looking for another one. So we'll see. On March 29th of 2011, Miss Taylor's torso, skull, and hands recovered near Ocean Parkway, i.e. a second dump site. On April 4th of 2011, Miss Mack's skull, hands, and right foot were also discovered near Ocean Parkway, also a second dump site. The recent discovery of this document prompted the April 2024 cadaver search of the Manorville area, which did not yield the recovery of additional sets of human remains, thereby reinforcing the task force members' belief that the HK planning document refers to Heuermann's preparations for either Jessica Taylor and or Valerie Mack. And who knows who else? So that cadaver dog search that they did in April of this year did not yield any results. And remember, they were there for at least 6 or 7 days. The HK planning document on Heuermann's computer then delves into a 3-category section with the headings of pre-prep, prep, and post-event. Pre-prep. In that column, we see vehicle inspection, engage target 1, recon dump site 1, locate dump site 2, weather report, recon video cameras, and recon pickup zone for video cameras. So meticulous planning that went into this, including the weather and the indication that he intended to use 2 different dump sites, and the video cameras and the pickup zone for video cameras. Make sure that his car was working properly. And then under prep column is listed setup stage, holding area, build table, crossbar, hard point. Going back to that Palm Pilot, I wonder if the guy that he was hiring to come and build something had anything to do with building that table or that crossbar. Hard point. Post event. Destroy file, but he spells it DISTROY. Change tires, which is italicized for some reason. I guess he didn't, if any tire marks were found, he wanted to have different tire treads. Burn gloves, dispose of pictures, and have a story set. So he did take pictures, but then he disposed of the pictures? Perhaps? 6x6 cutting bandsaw, that's what it was, right? Says Smurf Anna. Kathy Ford says, plotting out years of fantasies. Amy Lou, thank you for your super chat. Remember all those that said he wouldn't have changed his MO? Well, looks like we were right, Mel, because he most definitely did. Yes, he was younger. He was younger. Dismembering takes a lot of work from what I hear. And when he didn't get caught, when he did all those earlier dismemberings, maybe he decided it wasn't really worth it because nobody's connecting him to any of this anyway, because he thought he was so smart because of his planning documents. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Amy Lou. I do feel validated. And thanks, Moxie Rella, for becoming a new member. Welcome. And Angela, thank you for your super sticker. And Nancy Joe said, Duty Ron, in this case is how I found you. I don't comment much, but I'm always watching. Your coverage is the best. Thanks, Nancy Joe. If you're just joining, I'm having StreamYard issues and I can't get any camera to work with StreamYard right now. But Landry, Collier says that he's going to help me. Collier Landry's going to help me with, this is a mess with StreamYard, but thank you. Usually you can see my face. I hate tuning into channels where you can't see people's faces and you see a black box and my icon won't even come in right now. So thank you, Nancy Joe, for tuning in all the way since Duty Ron. And on top for always coming in with a super sticker. Thank you. Moving on with the doc. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe pre-prep to be a guide on steps to take in advance of a homicide, i.e. inspecting the vehicle, engaging the target, conducting a recon or a survey of video surveillance cameras in pertinent areas, including the pick zone, i.e. the location where a victim is picked up, and checking the weather to ensure for optimal conditions. Prep, on the other hand, appears to be a reference to steps taken closer in time to homicide, i.e. setting up the staging area, holding areas, and table/crossbar/hard point for the victim. So clearly, based on this planning document, it indicates to me that there was a place where he held these women and did horrific things to them. And I'm having visions of Dexter in my head, except Dexter only killed the people who needed to be killed. Dexter had a table. Dexter always had a set it up with the plastic, and I'm only using Dexter as a reference because a lot of you have probably watched that show and you can sort of relate to what I'm talking to. He always had all the plastic. He had the full face mask. He always dressed in the disposable materials. Yeah, the hunting. This hunting, exactly. Wild Man's Mom. The hunting part of this sends me right back to Shannon Gilbert, as if there was some sort of game where he and maybe others with him would send a woman out into the woods or something and then hunt them down. I've always thought that about Shannon Gilbert. And I do not believe that was an accidental death. Nobody can convince me otherwise right now. Specifically, the prep section has 5 entries: set up stage, holding area, build table, crossbar, and hard point. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members are aware that a crossbar is often placed underneath tables to provide further structural support for heavier objects being placed on a table. In addition, the task force members are also aware that a hard point refers in the field of, let's say, well, I don't know. At this point, I've already said too much. Sexual suspension bondage to a fixed attachment point in the ceiling that supports the weight of an individual being suspended off the ground, which is corroborated by Heuermann's significant interest in dirty materials where the subject is either suspended, tortured, or bound to a table, head removed, and or their chest parts are mutilated, which is consistent with the foregoing notations regarding suspension as well as the condition of the victims described herein. This is sicker than we even imagined. Sicker than we even imagined. Yep. Smexual, thank you. That's a great, this is a smexual suspension. Oh, wow. As if maybe he hung them from the ceiling in that basement of his that the Bilko doors went to. Yes, Debbie, it is horrific. This is more horrific than we could have even thought. Carrie says, hunting sounds like Robert Hansen in Alaska. One was a spy, not that one. Kirsten says, is it just me or did everybody have a house in the neighborhood that would always seem to be under construction on the inside? Plastic draped over the windows and such. Does it make you wonder? Just Samantha said, why the old abandoned buildings in the Bronx make perfect sense, all boarded up. And Karina, Shannon Gilbert blew the whole case wide open. Yep. Yep. The Gilgo 4 never would have been discovered if they weren't looking for Shannon Gilbert. And neither would the remains of 7 more victims along that stretch of Ocean Parkway if they weren't still looking for Shannon Gilbert. Serene says, this is absolute Dexter. Hi, Tiff. Says hunting killing, name of doc, in my opinion. Mazzy agrees with me on Shannon. Copa, does anyone know if he's heading for trial or if there's talk of a plea? Listen, I've heard his attorney, Michael Brown, talk, and I think at this point he is still claiming that he's innocent. But remember, he's also become pen pals with the Happy Face serial killer. Did you guys know that? So that's his new pen pal. Veni Vidi Vici. Or bitchy. I got absolutely canceled on Reddit for commenting on the Hunter part. I've been thinking that all along. That's why he has all these guns. That's why there are so many gun clubs on Long Island. So many. And I don't know if I had seen, I don't know, a Criminal Minds episode about it or something, but I had this in my head about the hunting portion of this. Classy Lassie says he did not have a secret room in his house. Nobody had a gun vault where they found those 297 guns, I think, and a mattress. I don't know if it was secret, but he definitely had a basement or a cellar that was accessed from the outside of the backyard through Bilko doors or bulkhead doors if you're in Massachusetts. That's what you guys call them. So, hi, Linda Vergata. Said I just heard on an interview he had a storage unit where they think he did his dismemberment. Well, that would make sense, Linda, because Dexter did that too, right? Didn't Dexter also have a storage unit? I'm gonna have to go back and look at when the first season of Dexter aired, but remember we saw the Suffolk County Medical Examiner truck on site at one of the storage units that he had in Amityville all the way back in like last July when he was first arrested. And we said we didn't think the medical examiner would show up unless there was something to identify, unless there were some remains or something. And again, during the recent search in Massapequa of his house, the medical examiner's truck was there as well. Thank you, Linda, for chiming in. And my hope and prayer is that Karen Vergata will be the next victim to be connected to this monster. And I thought that this was going to be news of that. Linda Vergata, again, thank you for the super chat. Enter cabinet maker's hammer. Yeah. Okay, so back to the suspension. Additionally, post-event appears to refer to a checklist of tasks following the event or homicide to avoid apprehension, i.e., destroy, again spelled DISTROY, file, change tires, burn gloves, dispose of pics taken of the victim, and have story set, e.g., alibi, story for family upon their return, or law enforcement should an inquiry be made. The HK planning document continues to further expound on preparatory measures such as specific recon steps taken. See recon reports and takedown/pickup sections embedded below. Packaging a body for transport. See body prep section embedded below. And steps to inhibit victim identification and avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. See body prep and dispose of the following sections embedded below. There was a footnote 7 that I just want to read. It says recon is commonly utilized as shorthand for the word reconnaissance, which means to survey or research a specific area in order to ascertain particular strategic features. And here are the sections entitled recon reports. Video cams on LIE Route 112 to Route 110 equals 33 old. So tell me what you think that means. That means that there were 33 video cameras on the LIE between Route 112 and Route 110. Number 2, video cameras on the Southern State Parkway, Route 231 to exit 30 equals 10 old, as if there were 10 old video cameras, or that's old information. I'm not sure. And then target one info, cell number. And I'm putting these cell numbers out there because Suffolk County PD is looking for information on these cell phone numbers because they have not been able to track them down, these cell phone numbers. So they want these cell phone numbers out there. Target one info, cell phone number 917-294-4402. And the beeper and voicemail number was 917-898-9854. Oh, Melissa Smith, I love you. Says, when looking into a new case to form my opinion of guilt or innocence, the first thing I do is find out what Jay Coffin said, and I know it's the opposite. Jesse says 33 cameras between Patchogue and Melville, then 10 between the Melville location in his house, in my opinion. Interesting. Those were his hunting grounds. Those are his stomping grounds. We can ascertain that from this document alone. Kimbers, Ohio says it seems someone was taking notes for him. I work for architects, and his notes definitely aren't articulate like they are. The spelling alone tells me an architect isn't writing this, in my opinion. So you think that he had a partner? That's interesting. I was surprised by all the misspellings too. Tiffany says we need to find out who these cell numbers belong to, right? Oblivious Benson, are you here? Can you go into the Wayback Machine? Well, Scott, my amazing moderator, did a reverse search on one of those numbers and came up with some names. But I'm wondering, if that's a new number for that person. Wouldn't you think that Gilgo Beach Task Force could at least do a Google search and maybe they figured out that those people just got those numbers recently? I don't know. I hope so. Hope, Scott. Hope so. Under the takedown pickup section, it says hunt too long, seen in area too long. Remember, don't charge gas. Recon for video cameras in pickup area next time. Again, next time. Body prep. Wash body inside and all cavities. I guess that would explain his body wash and wipes list on his supplies. Remove trace evidence, fingerprints, and hair. He didn't do so well on the hair, since the hairs are what is connecting him to these crimes. Remove trace DNA, remove ID marks, tattoos, marks, remove marks from torture, remove head and hands, package for transport. So apparently during this 2002 to 2004 phase, he was still in the dismemberment phase. And so I think we can look for a whole lot of other maybe cold cases, not just on Long Island, but we know that he had property in Massachusetts going north. And we know that going south, he had ties at least as far as South Carolina and maybe Florida, and that he had a timeshare at some point in Las Vegas. So there may be a way to connect him to a lot of these cold cases. In my opinion only, as always. Dispose of the following: tools and devices, target one clothes and personal items, drop clothes, but he means drop cloths, wipes and towels, props, toys, and wood items, anything that touched target one, what you wore, destroy book and computer files, again, DISTROY, burn gloves, dispose of box of plastic bags to avoid trace. Plastic is spelled wrong and bags is spelled wrong. But again, this goes back to the burning. When some of his neighbors were interviewed when he was first arrested, they said that he was burning stuff in his backyard all the time. all the time. So that even is as recent as 2022, 2023. There could be a lot more recent cases even attached to him if he was burning stuff in his backyard all the time. The body prep section above includes a note to remove head and hands, which clearly relates to the condition of Jessica Taylor's and Valerie Mack's remains, as both victims had their heads removed and their limbs removed at their arms below their elbows. Additionally, each of these victims' remains, as well as remains of the Gilgo Four, were indeed, quote, packaged for transport, end quote, as this section indicates to do, further increasing the significance of this document's presence on Heuermann's laptop computer. Finally, this section also includes a note to remove ID marks and tattoos. As noted herein, the examination of Ms. Taylor's body in July of 2003 indicated numerous sharp linear injuries to the victim's skin, specifically around where Ms. Taylor's tattoo had been located, which investigators believe was intended to inhibit the identification of Ms. Taylor's tattoos, and therefore Ms. Taylor, in a manner consistent with the HK planning document. Furthermore, the dispose of the following section lists destroy computer files as a checklist item. The presence of this HK planning document in unallocated space demonstrates Heuermann's effort to destroy or delete computer files in a manner that is consistent with this notation. As set forth in Exhibit A, a consistent theme of Heuermann's computer activity is the use of forensic wiping software, among other things, in a manner that is consistent with this notation in the HK planning document. In Things to Remember section, there are notes indicating steps to take next time, i.e., considering a hit to face or next time, considering a hit to the face or the neck next time, or using heavier rope for the neck as the light rope broke under stress of being tightened. Heuermann further opines on the importance of sleep to not only avoid problems, but also to increase what Heuermann refers to as playtime. Okay, playtime. Okay, this is freaking me out a little because I did a show a while ago on a bunch of cold cases from the 80s on Long Island, and there were more than one, I believe, victim, and you guys can tell me if I'm remembering this correctly, who were found with ropes or something else around their neck in cemeteries and on golf courses. It's in the LISK playlist, and there were cold cases that we looked at from the 80s and 90s of young women who went missing and their bodies were found, and they were found with ropes around their necks and or shirts, some sort of choking thing. But again, when he's talking about playtime, he's clearly doing something and keeping these women around for some period of time in a place that he has total control over, which, as somebody said, could have been the storage unit or could have been the cellar, depending on whether he was living with anyone at the time, depending on whether his family was in town at the time. So freaky. I need to go back and watch my show again on the cold cases from the 80s and 90s and see if there's any similarities to these things that he's mentioning in his manifesto here. Things to remember. Back to his document. Sound travels, i.e., bird outside. Control the amount of air in and out to control the noise made. Again, I'm going to go back to that vault in his cellar in Massapequa Park. Everybody's screaming at me that no way, that wasn't a secret room. It wasn't a vault. It wasn't a thing. It had a mattress in it. And that thing had no windows. It had no vents. It had 297 guns in there. But we're going all the way back to 1993 now, folks. Get sleep before hunt. Too tired creates problems. Hit harder. Too many hit to take down. Consider a hit to the face or neck next time for takedown. More sleep and noise control equals more playtime. Use push pins to hang drop cloths from ceiling, not tape. Use heavy rope for neck. Light rope broke under stress of being tightened. Okay, so we got to look for cases where there were light ropes used that didn't work out for him. And again, heavy, H-E-V-E-Y. Tightened is spelled wrong. Drop cloths is spelled wrong. I believe that the DA said during his press conference that they found push pins when they took down some paneling. Some other things behind the paneling. Yep, TJ, exactly what I said earlier. Sounds like he set up a room like Dexter did. Right. And some people think it might have been in the storage room because I think the storage unit. Well, this list, Anne, is not from 1993. This is the 2002 to 2004 list. But the original document was created in the year 2000. But one of the victims that he was just connected to, Sandra Costilla, her life was taken in 1993. So it seems like he's learning from his mistakes, trying to do it better next time. Again, next time. Ugh. As set forth above and embedded here below, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe these references to next time indicate Heuermann's prior experiences and what changes to implement moving forward. Takedown / pickup. Hunt too long, seen an area too long. Remember, don't charge gas. Recon for video cameras in pickup area next time. Moreover, the references in the Things to Remember section utilize push pins to hang drop clothes from ceiling and not tape, I should say drop cloths, as well as manifested concerns regarding sound travel, indicate the referenced incidents would have occurred indoors and likely inside of the target residence, which is a controlled environment that Heuermann would not only be familiar with, but also an area where Heuermann would have access to said tools and supplies. Drop cloths would also serve the twin purposes of limiting the spread of forensic evidence, such as blood, to a confined area, as well as controlling sound travel, which would lead to more, quote, playtime, which is believed to be a reference to sexual and mutilation acts were perpetrated on victims. Additionally, with Heuermann's family vacationing out of state, defendant would have had unfettered time and exclusive access to the target residence, allowing defendant Heuermann ample opportunity to execute and clean up after these crimes. Greg Hall Art says, and no one living in the house knew he had a torture victim in the basement. Right. Well, apparently during one of these women disappearances that he was charged with, they were in smuggler's notch because he held on to his long distance phone records going all the way back to 2002 or 2003. Finally, the HK planning document on Heuermann's laptop computer includes a notes section. Notes, spur of the moment. Cover, ? Stockholm Syndrome. The more you do, the more clues you give. Look at the, quote, painting, end quote. Why, what, why, who? This is supposed to say organized versus disorganized, but it's spelled so poorly that that's what it says. Organized versus disorganized. Page 162. Sex substitution, page 163. Page 175, mutilation equals disorganized. The investigation to date has established the source of these notes, i.e. the Mind Hunter paperback book authored by John Douglas, specifically the first edition published in 1996 concerning the criminal profiling of serial killers. There's a footnote here, footnote 8. Says John Douglas is a retired special agent and profiler from the FBI who spent over 25 years in the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. During his time with the FBI, Douglas interviewed over a dozen serial killers and other violent SOs, which led to numerous publications, including the Mindhunter book. For example, The notes section of his planning document includes the following notation. We just looked at that, page 162 and 163. Page 162 of said book does indeed reference sex substitution, which means not actual intercourse, but using another object. As Douglas describes, the rather horrible, you can read it there for yourself, over the victim's body, but no intercourse. The invasion of the woman's body with the umbrella and pen were acts of that kind of substitution. On page 163, Douglas opines that the perpetrator of such a crime, i.e. the substitution crime, would be a disorganized killer who would be compulsive and perhaps living with his parents. Accordingly, this notation contained in the HK planning document is consistent with the aforementioned book in page number and subject matter. The notes section of the HK planning document also includes the following notation. Page 175. Mutilation equals disorganized. In page 175 of the first edition Mindhunter book, Douglas describes a woman's screams and shortly thereafter how the woman's throat had been cut and her naked body mutilated. Douglas further asserts on page 175 of the book that this act is a sign of disorganized personality type. Accordingly, this notation contained in the HK planning documents is again consistent with the aforementioned book in page number and subject matter. The notes section of the HK planning document also contains the following notation. Look at the, quote, painting, end quote. What, why, who? I'm going to break from this to tell you that when I first read this document, the first thing I thought of was that really super creepy painting that we saw the search team or the CSI team recover from his house during the original search, that super creepy painting of what looked like a body of a woman or a doll or something, and that super creepy doll. But they explain it in a little more detail here. Well, this is interesting. Jadzia, 1969. Is it true that the character of David Rossi in Criminal Minds was based on John Douglas? I don't know, but that is one of my favorite shows. So if anybody does know that, let me know. Pat Sanford says, OMG, this makes me sick. I can't imagine how John Douglas must feel to know his knowledge and writing was used by a killer to evade being caught. Yeah. On page 19 of said book, Douglas notes that while he was still at the FBI, he always advised his agents, if you want to understand the artist, the perpetrator, what you have to look at the painting, parens, the victim, and parens. We've looked at many paintings over the years and talked extensively to the most accomplished artists. Accordingly, the note above contained in Heuermann's laptop computer to look at the painting yet again points to the aforementioned book as the source of Heuermann's commentary. Finally, the other notations contained in the HK planning document, i.e. spur of the moment, cover, Stockholm Syndrome, the more you do, the more clues you give, are also each contained in the said book, all pointing to it as the source of Heuermann's notations. The footnote here says Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological condition that explains why victims or hostages can sometimes develop a psychological bond or empathy for their captor or abuser. The foregoing is corroborated in part by Heuermann's possession of other serial killer books authored by John Douglas. During the initial search warrant execution in July of 2023 at the target residence, the task force observed that Heuermann possessed in his home office the book entitled The Cases That Haunt Us, here's an image of the book, which outlines the facts, evidence, and victimology of several notable serial murder cases. There's a good plug for the book. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe that the totality of circumstances surrounding the HK planning document, including Heuermann's attempt to delete its existence, points to it as Heuermann's self-education and homework on the topic of carrying out serial S-type murder. Heuermann's pointed concerns regarding 1, avoiding being captured on video surveillance, 2, leaving behind forensic evidence, 3, what supplies to purchase, 4, how to package a body for subsequent transportation to dump sites, for example, wash body inside and all cavities prior to package for transport, 5, avoiding a paper trail tying him to crimes and or crime scenes, for example, remember, don't charge gas. 6, concerns regarding noise and or air travel, which could inhibit, quote, playtime, end quote. And 7, how to improve next time. Further confirm merely by looking within the four corners of the document itself its relevance in this regard. This belief is further corroborated when looking at a litany of external factors, including, among other things, how the 6 victims now attributable to Heuermann were indeed packaged and transported, and in the case of Ms. Taylor, how her head, hands, and tattoo were removed and or obliterated, consistent with the document's instructions. Furthermore, an analysis of Heuermann's computers confirms the HK planning document was in an unallocated space and had hence been deleted, which is consistent with not only the destroy computer files notation, but also Heuermann's established use of forensic wiping software. Penalties. If convicted on the current charges, defendant Rex Heuermann faces multiple sentences of life without parole. Remand without bail is appropriate. Based on the serious, heinous nature of these serial murders, the strength of the people's case, the life incarceration the defendant faces upon conviction, the extreme measures this defendant took to attempt to avoid apprehension for over a decade, and defendant's indictment on these additional charges, which now incorporates a 5th and 6th victim, people remain steadfast that the only means to ensure the defendant's return to court is to remand the defendant without bail. That is dated yesterday, June 6th of 2024. And he has been remanded without bail, and he remains in Suffolk County Correctional Facility. And that, my friends, is the end of this 37-page superseding indictment, which has just indicted Long Island serial killer suspect Rex Heuermann in the deaths of Sandra Costilla from 1993 and Jessica Taylor from 2003. Llama Mama, all of this is so disturbing. Then to know he could have been stopped so much earlier. Right. He could have, but he wasn't. Because, I don't know. Can you hear me can you hear me now? I just wanted to take the document off the screen. Just tell me if you can hear me. I think you can. And there's probably much more. Yep. Okay, good. Yeah, so my face is not on screen because StreamYard sucks and my camera, it won't attach to either one of them. I have 2 cameras set up and my microphone. So the sound sucks too, but we're here for it because that's all we have right now. So, and that just makes my rage so much worse, says Mick of Time. If not for Shannon, says Lady Prudence, I'm telling you, hopefully they can connect Shannon to him as well. Shannon Gilbert. TJ, I wonder if he took Shannon Gilbert back to his house and put her back in the marsh. She was found face up. If she drowned, she would have been face down. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It does. I mean, they searched that location where Shannon Gilbert went missing extensively and they found nothing. And then they don't find her until months and months later. Pat Sanford, do you think Rex and Jimmy Burke ever crossed paths? I'll ask you guys in the chat. What do you think? We know that Michael Brown, his attorney, has requested all information on Jimmy Burke. Hello, Anne. I think the ongoing grand jury, I think the grand jury is ongoing. And I think they are still uncovering evidence. I think that Valerie Mack will be next, being that she was found in the same general area as Jessica Taylor. And, you know, it takes time for them to get these forensics on these hairs, but they've been doing it. And I've been to court to see Rex Heuermann, as you know, a couple of different times, and he's being given at least 4 hours a day in jail to review his legal documents. And he looked straight at me one time when I was in the courtroom, and it was chilling, and you could feel this evil when he walked into the room. It was like a whole presence of evil. That stuff is real. Just Samantha says, check out Murder Inc. Corp has killings all the way back to the 80s where and around Rex working and live. Yeah. And I've done a couple of shows on some other cold cases too, and I'm not sure if they're the same ones, but go back in my playlist list and I would need to watch them again myself to see if we can, now that we know what his MO is and his planning documents say, that we can maybe connect any other of those older cold cases from the 80s and 90s to him. Very interesting. Margaret DeYounger, God bless all law enforcement investigators that had to go through this horrific evidence, especially photos and videos to take this monster down. I'm anxious to see what else they found, but I'm not going to go over that today with you because we've been here for 2 hours and 15 minutes and nothing's working right. So we suffered through it. I hope it wasn't too painful for all of you to not be able to see me and only listen to me with crappy audio. But I wanted to go over this document with you since it was from yesterday and thought that we could talk about it. And I will follow up on this case with you very soon. So as I always say, thank you to my moderators. You guys are amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. You keep the chat classy. We tried our best to stay away from the most graphic of words today. But, you know, it's not always easy. Sometimes we just can't. Sometimes we just can't. So as I always say, my friends, be cool, be kind, be classy. It is not hard. Really, it is so not hard. And we'll be back early Monday morning with live coverage of the Karen Reed case. That court day is going to start at 8:30 a.m. And I have something, we are planning something, Ali Mata and I, of Defense Diaries. So make sure you hit subscribe and hit the bell because that will be done either Saturday or Sunday. And you don't want to miss that. It's going to be a good one. So I'll see you soon, guys. Peace out.